Well, we've just dealt with two calls in this last session. The first on ecumenical relations and the second on interfaith. And both were received warmly. I think there's obviously points of detail to deal with in both. But I think in terms of the Episcopal Church, we've got plenty of things under our belt in terms of interchurch. It's maybe in the interfaith area that there's much more to be done. And I suppose one of the things that became clear to me in the plenary session earlier when we reflected on interfaith relations is that being part of a worldwide communion means that there are parts of the church which have to deal with interfaith relations in a very different way to the way we deal with them in Scotland. I would think our interfaith relations in Scotland are pretty warm, respectful, and we do a lot together, and we understand that there's a lot of common ground, actually, within our common humanity on things like response to the pandemic or response to the climate crisis. Whereas there are parts of the world where faith communities, including Christian faith communities, are persecuted and are oppressed by other faith communities. Bishop Gooley, Bishop of Chelmsford, was born in Iran, and she told us something of her story, which was that when she was very little, they had to leave. Her father was Bishop of Iran, and they had to leave as a family when she was very young, and her 27-year-old brother was killed by the then resurgence of Islamic extremism, and they never were able to move back. And indeed, the church in Iran still is hardly tolerated at all. So what interfaith dialogue means in that setting is obviously very different to what it means in the Scottish setting. So for myself, I've been quite impressed, really, listening to voices from different parts of the Anglican Communion about the way in which we as a communion are addressing this question of interfaith. It feels to me we've moved on hugely since the 1990s. I remember as a university chaplain having to lead prayers for the bishops of the Church of England one time when they came to our chaplaincy, and I prayed for people of other faiths, and one of the bishops took me aside afterwards and said, well, thank you for those prayers, but the prayers for interfaith were very hard won. And I think it's just so obvious now that we might pray for people of other faiths and hope that they would pray for us too.